session on 10 markers. This is for AQA A-Level Economics. Let's go through tips, timing and technique. Tip number 1, know what to expect. The question will likely be phrased as so. To what extent, if at all, do the data suggest X? X is the question. X is what the insert's all about. It could be housing prices, oil prices, economic development in a certain country. It will then be followed with, you must use the data in extract C. It could be extract B, it could be extract D, but in this case it says extract C. So you must use that. Please ensure you highlight that so you don't drop that. But do not limit yourself to just that extract. You can use other extracts beyond that. Tip number 2, know where to find it. You're going to find this question in paper 3, section B, and it's going to be question 31. The first one after those 30 multiple choice questions. Tip number 3, the data is your focus. You need to interpret the data, come up with 3 points that you're going to briefly analyse. Briefly analyse, not to the same level as even a 9 marker, because this is a data question. So find 3 data points, each one briefly analyse, a quick 1, 2, 3 sentence explanation, and then evaluate that data. What are the limitations of that data? What's the issues with that data? Is it the bias or the time period? Or the fact that it's not providing enough information and you could have more? And we'll look at that in a bit. Tip 4, there's no need for diagrams here. Instead, don't focus on diagrams, focus on manipulating that data. If you've been given some raw data, could you make a percentage change there to really explain that in a bit more detail? Tip number 5, data limitations. So you need to find limitations, problem with the data to support your conclusion that you make at the end. Here's some examples of limitations you could find in the data. There's a small size of countries or economies. There's a small time period for the trend that they're trying to suggest. Maybe it's only a 1-year trend, that's not enough. The data doesn't show the full picture. It could show more. Could you say what more it should show? The source is biased if there's a news report. And finally, it needs more data such as this. Maybe you could say exactly what it needs to make it a more rock solid, clear, robust argument. Let's move on. Tip number 6, final judgment. You must make a judgment. You have to make a judgment. You have to do an AJKO at the end because you need to come up with if you think the data suggests X or doesn't suggest X. Which is it? So answer the question, curl off the precise wording of the question. Then justify why. What is your top data of those 3 we discussed? Then show some balance. What's the key issue? Just quickly. And then overall come back over the top. Why is the data suggesting this? Why are you going with that line of argument? In terms of timing, we're thinking 15 to 20 minutes for this 10 marker on paper 3. And in terms of technique, something like this. You got your 3 data points. You discuss data 1. Then you need to say what the limitations are. Then you take data 2. Then you discuss what the limitations are of that. Then you get data 3, and then you discuss the limitations of that. Each time you need to have briefly analysed what it means, and then you follow that with what the limitations are. And at the end, you need to come to a final judgment, your AJKO, to say to the examiner which way you're going with your answer about whether you think the data does suggest X or does not suggest X. In terms of your data, you might find that all 3 line up in the same direction. They're on the same side of the argument. But there's nothing wrong with if you have 2 bits of data on one side of the argument and 1 bit of data on the other side of the argument. But be sure, if you have 2 pieces of data on side A of the argument, make sure that is where your final judgment is, because it creates narrative. I hope that helps, and I'll see you at the next sesh.